everyone. Thanks for being here. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting tonight on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people of the Kulin Nation. They're the traditional custodians of the land on which the Wheeler Centre exists, and I would like to acknowledge any First Nations people with us today. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. My name is Brodie Lancaster, and I'm really excited to be spending the next hour chatting to these two wonderful authors about their new books. I have them next to me. There are plenty at the back of the room. If you don't have a copy yet, you can grab one at the end of the event, and they'll be signing their books as well. That's one of the housekeeping things. The other one is that you're all going to be able to ask some questions later on if you're so inclined. There's going to be mics roaming around, so just raise your hand, the mics will come to you, I'll call on you. So as we're chatting, think of stuff you want to ask and you can be a part of it too. Okay, that's it. All right, here tonight to talk about the classic triple threat of comedy, tragedy, and the millennial condition are the two authors of new books that take distinctive, funny, and sharp looks at the way we live and think and misbehave today. Patrick Lenton is an author and culture journalist and the editor of the queer-led independent publication Nonsense, a newsletter which covers comedy, queer news, and culture. And his novel, In Spite of You, is the queer revenge rom-com you've been waiting for. Please welcome Patrick. And Sashi Perera is a comedian, writer, and recovering lawyer whose 2023 debut show, Endings, earned her a nomination for Best Newcomer at the Melbourne International Comedy Festival. And she's here tonight to tell us all about her coming-of-age, absurdly late memoir, Standstill. I would love for each of you to kind of, I've introduced you, but I would love for each of you to kind of introduce your books and I suppose the idea or the motivation or the thing that made you need to sit down and start writing a book, however many years ago that was for each of you.
My book is very much about, it's spite, but it's a romantic comedy. So it's kind of about the point after you get dumped and your life is in ruins, and then how you kind of recover from that in both good and bad ways. And really, this is about about a young pop culture journalist named Jeremy, who is not me.
He's not. He lives in Sydney.
Yeah, which I used to. No, I mean it's not me. And he gets invited back to his university's creative writing degrees. Reunion, and which his ex-boyfriend will be there, his ex-boyfriend who ruined his life, not just broke his heart, but like genuinely ruined his life. Mm-hmm. And he did that thing, and he's in his he's just turned 30, and he does that thing where he kind of, forces him to take stock of his life, and he looks around and he's just very dissatisfied.
He does a Romeo and Michelle, if you will.
He absolutely does. But instead what he decides to do is, instead of lying, he decides that he's got 6 months to actually make his life better, so that he can then turn up at the reunion and be fabulous and, beautiful, and somehow get revenge. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, he falls in love along the way, and that's all I'm going to say.
The greatest revenge of all.
Exactly.
And Sashi, your main character is yourself. So I imagine your process was... I've written a memoir. It's not always the most fun.
Correct. I saw it as, can everyone hear me? I wasn't sure about, yes? Okay, they said a fist size. Yeah, okay, anyway. Sorry, it was quite different. I saw it as sitting down with a completely unhinged friend who I don't have to hang out with anymore, this version of myself that I was 10 years ago. So the book opens in Colombo in Sri Lanka, and it's 2 days before my wedding was supposed to take place there. And most people, after they cancel a wedding, I think would take some time for self-reflection, maybe go to therapy like their family and friends were suggesting. I moved to Egypt instead, which was fine. And then I moved to Tanzania and then to Thailand, and then ended up here in Melbourne to do my master's. And I see the book as two sides. Like the first one is me running, and then the second part is me trying to learn to stay still. And it was, I think I think my personal opinion is that everyone has a story inside them. It's just the trick is to find the medium in which you best express yourself. And I think I'm lucky in that for me, it's writing. And to write the book, I have been oversharing on Facebook for so long, an embarrassingly long time. So I just went back through mostly my Facebook status updates and just thought, God, my friends were right when they were like, maybe you should just log off for a while, Sashi. That was the process.
There's this big theme that kind of runs throughout your book, and it's a little seed in parts and then it becomes more pronounced in others, which is you kind of finding this creative streak in yourself, like working as a lawyer, doing very serious like advocacy work. We follow you kind of between like jobs and relationships, but you start doing open mics in one of the places that you live, and then you land in Melbourne. You become a total gig pig. You're like going out and like seeing bands at venues all over the city. And then kind of at the end of the book, you sign up for a stand-up competition. And we kind of leave you there in book world. And obviously we know real world Sashi is now a stand-up comedian. So spoiler alert, it worked out. It went quite well. I'm curious to know, like when you're structuring a memoir, how did you kind of decide on that specific kind of like wedge of time in your life between the end of your engagement and kind of the start of this next chapter of your life taking off?
I think for me, this is why I don't know how you write fiction. I'm in awe because this is just charting my life. So the story was already laid out. You already know where the plot points are. I was very cautious. I didn't want it to be a book about, I cancelled a wedding, but then I found a partner and everything was fine. I really wanted it to end in a place where I was just on stable footing again. So it goes from me not knowing where home is to being like, oh, I think, is this home? I think I might have found home. So I think because it was when I landed in Melbourne, decided, yes, my 7-person share house was home.
Is that the one with the multiple dogs?
Yeah, no, that
That's
was
a
my
different
first share house. That was a terrible share house. We do not like that share house.
Yeah.
But then I ended up in the 7-person share house, and for some strange reason, that very much felt like home, and that's where I wanted to end the story because I wanted it to be more than a runaway bride story. For me, it started with a cancelled wedding, but it became about so much more about losing identity and losing home and losing work, and kind of the story of if all of your anchors are just kind of gone, where do you start to put the building blocks in again? Yeah.
Patrick, I would love to know a little bit about your relationship to the romantic comedy. I understand you spent some time working on the other side of not as an author, but in romance fiction publishing. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and also like what your mood board looked like as far as references for romantic comedies that you loved and that you maybe have an attachment to, but also what you saw as like gaps in the market from that professional side?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a massive like romantic comedy film lover. They're probably my favorite film to watch. They're the kind of film that you watch when you're like, oh, I'm sad, I'm going to watch a romantic comedy to make myself feel better, but also, oh, I'm happy, I'm going to watch a romantic comedy to like, revel in this feeling. So really, it's for everything. My family watch romantic comedies every Christmas Eve.
Richard Curtis family.
Very much a Richard Curtis family, although we stopped watching Love Actually years ago. Even sort of, it was like kind of before it kind of got cancelled in like popular culture. I just remember my mum one day sitting there and she was like, I hate this movie. And I was like, I don't particularly like it either. And then we sort of like, and my sister's like, yeah, I'm kind of sick of it. And we all looked at my dad, and he was asleep.
Wait, sorry to derail. Can you remind me why it got cancelled again? Is it because of the guy filming the friend's wife at the wedding, or is that just one of the many reasons?
I think so. I should remember because I was working in like woke youth media at the time.
Yeah.
So it's just really hard.
It's hard to remember. It's like, we don't like that anymore. Why
So
again?
why?
Don't remember.
Well, I've just internalized that.
17-year-old Keira Knightley getting married. Anyway.
I think it might be some of that and some other weird shit. Anyway,
okay.
Doesn't matter. But it wasn't until I worked for an imprint of Pan Macmillan, the publishing house, called Momentum, which was an ebook first imprint, and my particular role in marketing was to look after the imprint of an imprint which was called Momentum Moonlight, which was all romance and erotica books.
Great name.
And I had Can't Fight the Moonlight stuck in my head for about 4.5 years. It was great. But I'd never really read much romance, it was roughly about the time of the 50 Shades of Grey boom, where the romance bubble kind of breached its parameters and it wasn't just sort of Mills and Boons for your cool aunt anymore. It was now people outside are reading it. And so I kind of got this crash course because I was reading so much romance, so much erotica, found out that pretty much every erotica author in Australia is a mum from Queensland.
Really?
Yep. Best people in the world. I would go to these huge romance conferences and stuff, and it would just be these I think it was me and my boss were the only guys there.
Wow.
And I was clearly so I was not particularly of interest to these mothers, but my boss was only a little bit older than me, but a handsome man, and they would go feral over him, but in a very respectful, nice way.
In my imagination, he's doing meet and greets.
It was a bit like that. He was there to try to try to find new authors and schmooze that way.
Okay.
But he sort of became the celebrity.
Love this.
It was great. And so I read and published all these books, and at the time I was like, we should be doing more queer ones, why are these all relentlessly heterosexual? And my boss was like, well, they're not. There's also these there's a lot of male ones, but they're always written by straight women.
Yeah.
For straight women. And you could tell because lube was never used.
Yeah. It's kind of like a One Direction fan fiction kind of
Exactly.
thing. Not that I'd know.
Not that you know. And so I never really considered myself writing it because at that time there was no market for queer rom-coms, and that's the kind of rom-com that I'd want to write. And it just so happened that I kind of poked my head up maybe around 2019, 2020, and suddenly saw that there was books like Red, White and Royal Blue and Boyfriend Material. And I was like, oh, we're here. We've got it. And started writing it.
Perfect. It's happened.
It's happened. The gays are here.
They've moved into the neighborhood. Sashi, kind of similarly for you, what were your reference points, or were there any memoirs that you read in anticipation of writing yours? Whether you had them consciously in your head or not, tonally or structurally.
Sorry, I'm really trying to concentrate on your question, but my whole reality has shifted because I didn't know we're not supposed to be watching Love Actually anymore. So I've just
but we don't remember.
Sitting here,
we
just
don't
being
remember why.
Oh no, Christmas movie.
That's also 2016 era cancel culture.
Cancellation, so it might have swung back around.
It's probably swung right back around, and it's probably great now.
Because we go 1 for 1, me and my husband. So it's my pick is Love Actually for Christmas, and his is Die Hard. So if this drops out, it's only Die Hard. That's very stressful for me. I've just kind of.
You need to have something.
Yeah.
See, we mostly watch The Holiday.
Oh, The Holiday's lovely. Okay, so not problematic.
Not problematic.
Great, I'll go with The Holiday. Okay,
Jack
sorry.
Black bit. That scene where he scats
Yes.
should be problematic.
Yes, yeah. And he pulled Kate Winslet, batting.
Yeah.
Batting. She's from the Titanic. Sorry, we've gone on a tangent. I really loved a whole bunch of memoirs. I looked at their writing to just I tend to skew, when I write, I tend to skew so emo. I forget to be funny and I forget to be light. The first couple of drafts I handed to my editor, she was like, very dark. And I was like, I'm so sorry. I don't know where this is coming from, but, that's why it's a draft. And I read Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. I love that memoir because I don't like cooking and I'm a terrible cook. And that puts you straight into the kitchen and it makes you care about food and it makes you care about cooking. That was one that I really, really loved. Crying at H Mart. Mm-hmm. Michelle, I don't know how to say her last name. Zautner? Yeah. I really, really loved that as well because it was about such a heavy topic, but it was written in such a beautiful way. So I would say those were the main two that I kind of had as reference points for where I wanted to get to, because I wanted to talk about serious things, but I also wanted it to be fun and not just, I wanted that balance between dark and light as opposed to just being like, well, settle in for a tough day, in the next couple of pages.
Yeah, and your book kind of serves in a way as a kind of Trojan horse. Like, people buying it probably know you or are keen to learn more about you and like a comedian's personal life and this woman's kind of journey through her like emotional life, but they're also going to learn an incredible amount about the global plight of refugees and asylum seekers, which is your field of work.
It was my previous field of work and I put as much information as I could in there. So in every country that I'm working in and dating in, and there are enough terrible dating stories, I think, to keep it light, but I put as much information about the different systems that asylum seekers and refugees are working through, the workers who are trying to help them through it, and that was just, it was the reality of what was going on at the time. It was my work life and my personal life, and everything was a mess. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've tried to lay that out as clearly as I can.
Yeah. Something that I think weaves through both of your books and also through Sinead's, who sadly couldn't be here tonight, is this idea of the stages of life that you're in have these kind of prescriptive meanings that someone else has decided, and your characters, which for you, Sashi, is yourself, feel that they're kind of a step behind or they're not living up to someone else's expectation of where they're supposed to be. And I'm sorry to use this like very millennial phrase, but this idea of like doing adulthood wrong or something. And in Sinead's book, in Stink Bug, her protagonist kind of writes that she gets to this point where many of her friends, they feel like they were only catching up over like big major life events or crises, and anything she as a kind of single child-free woman was going through seemed frivolous in comparison. And Sashi, you wrote that after ending your engagement you discovered these two parallel worlds of couples and singles, and you felt like a pariah in the world of couples. Patrick, like I said, your protagonist goes full Romeo and Michelle, thinking he has to flip every part of himself and learn, was it like fermenting and pasta making and all of these things, because they will mean that he's impressive and he can measure up. I'd love to hear from both of you about that idea of comparison and where I think those expectations come from and how they operate as like a narrative tool or like a creative tool for your character, but also for your memoir writing.
I already said something. So
We're taking turns.
Yeah.
I mean, like it's such a millennial topic, isn't it? Because like we've been kind of held out of a lot of the sort of the signifiers of adulthood. Like my character was 30, living in a giant share house. I was at that point. I was also living in a share house at like 36, so like that always felt weird because it was an unnatural sort of situation and in a lot of ways. And I think that there is that real sense of like when you don't sort of know what the rules are, you do sort of look to your peers and start measuring yourself up against them. I think the added thing is that like there's that real that kind of like queer second adolescence thing where like because a lot of queer people come out later in life, then they'll kind of end up doing a lot of their firsts sort of when people are well past it. So so like I, for example, didn't come out until my late 20s. So then I was like, dating men for the first time at like a kind of more advanced age than you thought. And I've seen people who are like, I'm having like my first crush at the age of 30 because I've been so like closeted and repressed. And I think that like, once you sort of realize that there is no actual, blueprint, it kind of, it makes it better for you. But that doesn't stop us from doing the comparison thing. And like, and definitely as time has gone on, like the split between like my life and then the life of my friends who sort of got married and had children and moved to the suburbs a long time ago, like back in their early 20s, like that's diverged so much that it's now like aliens meeting,
On this one, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sort of like, oh, and tell me of this mortgage you're speaking of, and they're like, what's fun like?
Yes. When you sit down for a job interview with your friends who are married with kids, and they're like, what's happening out there?
Like, tell us all the stories about dating, and then you like tell them like two, and they're like, that's so depressing. Are you okay? I'm like, no, that was meant to amuse you.
I'm the jester. Sashi, what about you?
I think it was really nice going through what I did in my late 20s to learn some lessons about blueprints, exactly that. You grow up thinking that there is one blueprint. And also, I also thought when I was a kid that friendship really was forever. And that means that you all grow together and evolve together. And the reality is everyone does that at their own pace. And that doesn't mean that you go off and make new friends every time. But it does mean that if people aren't going through the exact same things that you are, you need to go seek out other people who are. So whenever life forks, so for me it was okay, I've been in couple land for almost 8 years and it's forked now. I need to go find single people, because I was finding that I was going to brunches with people who've been in couples for ages, and they were like, oh, Sashi, you're looking in all the wrong places for love. And I was like, okay, not all of us can fall in love in high school. Like, sorry. It's just not the same pool of men. Like the ocean it's toxic, and there's 3-headed fish in there, and I'm doing my best to try to find someone. And they just didn't understand. And I needed to go find people who understood. And that's a lesson that's served me over and over again. Like now I'm much older, but my partner and I, we've spoken about this very publicly, but it's been a really difficult journey for us with kids. So now I have the partner, but now not the kids. And now life is forking again. And I'm very much like, it's okay. I have friends, I can seek out community. You still have those old friends, but I don't know, they just don't tell you when you're a kid that the reality is that you will have to continue making friends, even as an adult, because life will keep changing, and that's okay. And that's something that I really needed to learn for myself. And probably if I hadn't gone through that in my late 20s, I wouldn't know how to do that now.
Yeah. I find my unrelenting kind of TikTok addiction really helps with kind of not comparing my life to anyone else's, because I'm like, oh, here's a 22-year-old stay-at-home mum of 7, and here's someone who gets up at 4 o'clock every day to do 17 things before their job. Wow, what a smorgasbord of lives there are.
I really love the ones that would be like, what I, a 25-year-old woman, wish I'd taught my younger self. And it's like, what do you mean? What do you mean?
Guys, I'm turning 25. What do I do? I'm like, I remember how that felt, but also now I'm like,
You don't know nothing.
Patrick, you had written before Standstill, non-fiction for the internet for many years. You had published collections of short stories, and what was kind of structurally, and as far as the work involved, what did it feel like to make that leap into a longer form novel? Did it feel like you were doing a very different kind of work?
Yeah, 100%. I think the biggest difference is delayed gratification. When I write an article for The Guardian, I usually write it on the day it's due. I send it in, then it's published like that afternoon or the next day, you know, and then I get to go, great, my hard work has been appreciated. I get to look at the comment sections and see all the Guardian people being like, I don't get this. That's gratifying.
Yeah.
Then the $300 appears in my bank account 4 weeks later.
You do know delayed gratification. You're a freelancer.
But, you know, that's all relatively, you know, like, that all gives me my attention, which I need pretty quickly. Same thing, like even with the short story collection, like that was mostly just me gathering short stories that I've written already. Same with the mini essay collection, I'd mostly performed those already. So it was less of a thing of like, I'm going to sit down and devote 2.5 years of my life to writing the one thing, go completely insane, and then not see it for another 1.5 years, and now get to experience the gratification. So I think that is the big difference. It's nice. It's kind of like writing edging, and it pays off, as edging should, unless you get forgotten about. But I think that the
Explain that to your friends in the suburbs.
I think a lot of them I think a lot of married couples understand what edging is, but
fair.
just not on purpose.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
So sorry. I think the big thing was I didn't realize how quickly I get bored, you know, and how much that motivates me to write different things. And so quite a few times during the process of writing this book, which I loved writing and I was enjoying writing, and then suddenly I'd get like, you know, I'd been working on it for a year and I'm like, no one wants this. This is bad. This is not good. I should have absolutely written a romantasy. You know, maybe I should start something new. And you've always got that other idea in your head. And that's where I realized that actually it's just about like commitment. That was the big difference.
What do you do when that voice comes in? Speaking as someone who may or may not have a novel that I'm telling myself no one wants to read in my head.
I guess I ignore myself as much as I can.
Do you have other people in your life that you show things to along the way?
I do, yeah. I've got a couple of close friends who are very supportive. So that definitely helped. But like, then on the sort of flip side, like I'm writing, I got a 2-book deal, so I'm writing the second book now, and that's been through 4 different ideas. And probably I wouldn't have spent so long on each of those ideas if I hadn't been like, now just ignore yourself, Patrick. You know, don't listen, just commit. And then after about like 6 months of writing absolute tripe, I was like, no, I think this is bad, actually.
Yeah. The self-critical voice, you're like, sometimes I need to listen to her.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sashi, I would love to hear about the relationship that you see between writing for performance and writing memoir. We were speaking backstage about you having to read the audiobook and how, you know, like it's a very different thing to deliver, you know, laughs to a crowd that are maybe stories about yourself versus, you know, reading aloud the chapters of your book that were not.
I think it's all been very strange. Like the only reason that I had a publisher come to me and ask if I wanted to write a book was because they'd seen my comedy and they'd seen my stand-up, and they said, you know, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I said, yes, only every day since I've been alive, so please, can I do that? But I think what I've found is that I am a writer first and a performer second, and the performance aspect doesn't come as natural to me. And I do love it in terms of the immediate feedback, because I love being in a room with people. I love hearing the laughs when things are going well, and creating an experience that's only in that room. But then sitting down and being able to write something and just sit with myself, which I really struggled to do, was quite a gift. And not having to perform for laughs was like, oh, I get to do just part 1 of the process. Awesome. So that was a really nice discovery that I enjoyed doing that. But very much by the time it got to the edit stage, it was very, this is all garbage, burn it down, walk into the sea. And there is a very large aspect to it where your mind's just trying to protect you from failure. And a large part of performing comedy has been ignoring that. I think what you have to do a couple of times is ignore it and see how you feel on the other side of that. And if it feels good, you keep going. And I know with comedy, at the start of anything, it's like, Sashi, we don't have to do this. We could move outside Australia. No one will know who you are. We can cancel the whole tour. It won't even matter. But then I'll go do the first show and I'll feel wonderful on stage, whether there's 4 people in the audience or the whole room is full. So I think I've always followed that feeling. And I applied the same thing to writing, where it was like, okay, if you're feeling bad after the first edit stage, you don't have to go through with it after the second. So you kind of keep pushing a little bit further, a little bit further, a little bit further. Kind of like edging, actually. And then bam, if you're not married in the burbs, apparently. So I think you kind of have to trick yourself. If you know that you have a mind that is anxious, if you're not practiced with handling all the nervous energy that comes with putting your work out there, which is actually, it's a really big thing to do, to put so much of yourself out there, and naturally you'll want to protect yourself and to ignore that at certain times and know when to listen to that voice at other times.
Oh my God, I feel like I'm getting a kind of creative therapy at the moment.
Oh my God, have
just
I turned this into a counselling session? Let's do this.
I needed to hear this.
Do you want to lie down?
Yeah, I kind of do. Get off the chair. There's something that you just said about that idea of like your brain is trying to protect you from failure that I think really resonates, because there's that kind of fight or flight, right? And like, Patrick, you perform comedy on stage as well. Like you know the feeling when you're not sure if the energy you're feeling is excitement or terror, Can you both kind of speak to that idea of like feeling that fear and doing the scary thing anyway?
I think Amy Poehler says in her memoir, Yes Please, that it's worth, I'm paraphrasing, it's worth doing if it scares you. And that's been something really, that I've really taken on board, because now I actually, sometimes when I'm, weighing up whether to do something, like an opportunity or a new job or, writing a book or something, I'll actually, test myself to see, is this actually scaring me? And sometimes the more it does, the more I'm like, well, that means I've got to do it, And the more I get kind of comfortable with things, the more I guess I want to sort of challenge myself. And so I don't like to be bored. So I think that's one of the things that I'm like, looking for that fright, actually it becomes a measure of it's worth doing then. And I should commit to it.
Do you feel like performing comedy helped you write a romantic comedy?
Yeah, 100%. So I do a lot of improv comedy and I've studied sketch writing and stuff. And even just on a scene by scene basis, so many of the times I would find myself using the rules that are ingrained in you as an improviser to dictate how the jokes are running, in the written word, which shouldn't seem like they really correlate that much, but really what it comes down to is a novel with comedic elements is usually dialogue focused. Any improvised scene is all dialogue, unless you accidentally joined a mime troupe, and so when you've got those sort of rules of how the structure, the way that status works, even just the way that a joke is meant to land through dialogue, I found that so incredibly helpful, and I really saw myself I found myself imagining that sort of scene on a stage as an improvised sort of thing.
Sashi, what about you? Do you think have you noticed your writing for stand-up or performance changing since you've written the book, or do you think the book was influenced by the work you were doing?
I think it's all very strange how interconnected everything has been. Like this book, it starts the same way that my first solo show started. So it was kind of, I think it follows the same trajectory, but in a very different way, because in a book you don't have to rely on punchlines, on keeping the audience interested. And so they're two very different mediums to present essentially the same story in. But I was very surprised by how anxious I felt just before the book launch. I was very surprised by that, because before I go on stage for a show, I always get nervous, especially if it's the first time. But the book was already written. The launch was filled with my family and friends. There was nothing that could possibly go wrong, and no mysterious element. And still I felt like I was going to vomit all day. And I thought, okay, well, this is a nice thing to know, that no matter what the thing, if I care about the thing, I will feel it physically in my body. And in my 20s, I used to deal with that feeling a lot by just drinking and disappear. I did, and drinking is not always bad. There are so many good aspects of drinking, oh my God. But, wow, but I used it a lot to manage my social anxiety, just anxiety in general. And learning to sit with that in my 30s has been probably one of the biggest and best discoveries, but it still surprises me how viscerally it is everywhere, and just kind of sitting with those feelings, like you're just sitting on the couch being like, my book launches in 7 hours and I can't do anything else. This is very strange.
Yeah.
But the mind, I think, hopefully in 20 years' time we understand the mind much better than we do now, but we're doing our best as we can. And for me, that just means sitting really still and just feeling those feelings before I get to the book launch.
You talking about drinking just reminded me of, Patrick talked about his second adolescence, and you started smoking. You write about in your book, like in your mid to late 20s, and doctors are like, why now? Why did you decide?
You will never feel as judged as when you tell a very nice looking doctor that you started smoking at 28. Like, there is just no
When you're a lawyer working for like
expression.
international organization, like she knows.
There's no expression, because there are those questions. It's like, do you smoke? How many times a day? How long you been smoking for? And I was like, since I was 28. And he's like, you're 31. You said, why? You got past the trying to look cool segment. But again, so much of it was anxiety for me. And I found it really difficult. Oh my God, smoking's addictive. Who knew? So once I picked it up, it was really hard to kick it. And but then in 2020, when we all went into lockdown, there were terrible things that happened. But I just stopped smoking, and I was like, it's a total crutch that I just picked up for whenever I'm nervous. And there's just no other reason that you can leave an entire group of people in a social interaction and just go stand by yourself for a second.
Yeah.
Whoever finds the answer to that is going to be a millionaire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was about to say, lockdown, it was like, there's no parties I have to take a 7-minute break from. So,
Nothing.
no
Yeah.
more sickies. Anyway, sorry, didn't plan that question. I am going to open it up. If anybody has any questions, this is your warning that I'm going to call on you in a minute. I have some more though, so start thinking, but I'm going to call on you in a second. The co-worker is a topic. It's a question that I had. I'm not going to lie. I had written this question thinking that Sinead was going to be here, but it was also a recurring theme in all three of your books. The idea of the co-worker as support system, as like automatic friend group. It is something that is like, there are side characters in both of your books that are, I know, Sashi, I keep calling them characters, but they're real people in your real life. But I think, thinking of the framing of this event as being about like the millennial condition, I don't know if maybe I'm projecting or because it's how I worked and grew up as well, but the idea that work goes from just being a thing that you do to make money to being your life's purpose and your whole identity and all of your friendships and all of your relationships, and that's where, you meet people, end of. And the co-worker is such a big part of that. I would love to hear a little bit from both of you about that intimacy that we as like millennial workers seem to kind of specifically have with the places we work, the people we meet there, the things that we do in our 9 to 5, and how they kind of bleed into everything else.
Yeah, we are, as a generation, we are so toxically riddled with like hustle culture and the grind and all that sort of stuff. And I suckled deeply. It was like, I truly believed in like, in like finding my dream job. It would give me purpose. It would help, like it would be everything I wanted. I mean, you only have to look at all the big TV from the kind of like peak millennial era. Like that's the era of Parks and Rec, The Office, later on, Younger, the Bold Type. Like I used to work at a publication called Junkie with Sinead, and I imagine that Sinead had a lot of inspiration from that kind of world, because that was like youth media startup vibes. Like we had the table tennis table in the office. We had the, like the cool founders with their puffy jackets. We had the not getting paid enough.
There's a breakout space next to a graffiti mural.
Yeah, exactly. And like I remember, like when I was trying to get a job at Junkie, because I worked in publishing for years, and then I sort of decided that like I kind of found out about culture writing as a thing that you could do, and I was like, whoa, hang on, and I was sort of like relatively late in my 20s, and so then I kind of like completely switched gears and tried to get a job at Junkie, and I was watching the first season of The Bold Type at the time. And just
you were little Jane.
I was little Jane. And I was sitting there watching that being
Your
like...
roommate has a gun.
Like, this is real. That is the best episode of television that's
Megan
ever
Fahey,
happened.
pre-White Lotus,
Yes.
had a gun.
Had a gun for skeet shooting, Jane. Not all of us are using guns to shoot up places. Some of us are raised in skeet shooting areas. Check your privilege, Jane.
We now live in New York, but I need my rifle.
It reminds me of home. And so I think that like that was a very kind of enthralling myth. Like I was obsessed with Parks and Rec, and that idea that you could find family in your workplace and earn money, which I'd never really done much of before. I was like, that's great, like friends, and I can afford to eat. This has got everything I want. And I think the disillusionment from that, Sinead's book is absolutely rife with that. Like that's basically about the capitalist dream kind of inverting on itself. And definitely in my book, like I don't think Jeremy, my main character, would get to that point where he's kind of looking around realizing that maybe his life sucks if he hadn't believed that he would get somewhere better by getting his kind of dream job, and only to have it sort of turn on him. And I think that that's going to be something, being disappointed by my work is going to be a theme that I'm going to explore for a long time.
Yeah. Sashi, how does that idea of kind of the work as identity and meaning feel for you as someone who was doing such an important job as, kind of like international refugee rights lawyer?
Are you saying pop culture journalist at Junkie was not important?
As a pop culture journalist, I would never.
I think it was very much my entire identity, and I think I was very proud of that. Yeah. And it started in law school. I did law at UWA in Perth, and I think it's different now, but basically it was all about going into a corporate career pathway. And, if you wanted to be kooky, you might work for a mining company, but everything else was like, why would you bother? And so for me, I had seen my parents very stressed about money for a very long time, and I just didn't want that. I just was very determined that there's more and there's purpose, and you gotta love what you do, and I want to work for the UN, and I want to change the world, and I look back at that person and I'm like, wow, you had such fire and that's so brilliant, but like, money's really important, you dumb bitch. It's hard not to feel that way now. But so I very much went the other way, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna, when my friends were all saving for a house deposit with their very well-paid jobs, I was spending my savings on chasing contracts around the world and not getting paid super or paying back my HECS or anything like that, but being like, that's fine, I'm helping to save the world and this is really important. And it was, but I also kind of wasn't taking into account how much I was missing by not being at home. And what I was missing was not just the financial implications that came with that, but the support systems that come with you working in a difficult area. So the family you count on, the friends you count on to kind of lift you up. And as a result of that, my colleagues were very much my family. And I still maintain that I met some of the best people, and some of them are still doing the best work, but that's because they were much smarter than me, and they traveled with their partners, and they stayed in places for much longer than 5 seconds before moving on to the next contract. So I feel like once I arrived in Melbourne, the idea was to do my master's and then go back away. And it's really only once I started counselling that I started understanding the importance of community beyond work, of having identities beyond your work, and slowly starting to disconnect from all of these ideas that I had when I was a kid. And with stand-up now, I try very much to see it. I don't see it as a life's purpose. I see it as something that I'm good at and that I like for now, and I'll keep doing for as long as it feels good. But also, it is not the one thing that I do. I'm still very, very committed to spending time with my partner, to spending time with my friends outside the area. And I think if I hadn't had that first experience, I may well have already burnt out in this area now, because I would have been like, this is where I need a Netflix special by this time, and I need another Netflix special by this time, and if I don't get it, I am garbage. And that is all gone now, which is really nice.
Oh my God, you're so healthy. That's my takeaway.
It was a long road.
Yeah. All right, does anyone have a hand up in the audience? I can't see very well.
There's someone over there.
Oh, there's one there? Okay.
Hello.
There
Hi.
we go.
Oh, there we go. Thanks both. Question for Patrick, actually, just regarding writing fiction. I'm just curious to know, like, whether you knew the whole story when you started, or you had a loose outline, or did it evolve as you went? What was it like for you?
Yeah, there's that old pantser or plotter question for novelists. So like, if you plot, basically you write down the entire structure of the book, and and some people will literally, they'll have every chapter and every chapter's beats written down before they even start. And then there's pantsers who are more improvised, and like on the extreme end of that spectrum, I know some authors who will literally sit down with a vague idea and just see how it comes out on the screen. I am like a classic bisexual, somewhere in the middle, and I basically give my my stories what I call a spine, kind of like a big T-Rex spine in a museum. So I have the big points, and I knew that I wanted to write a rom-com about someone who has a spite plan. And that's about as much as I started off with. I knew I had a pretty good idea of who the character would be, and that he was going to get revenge, but I didn't really know how that was going to sort of work out. And so for my spine, I basically just plotted out the major plot points, and did that with the classic kind of, and here's the complication, and and here's the resolution, and here's the happy ending, where they run through the airport. Or
I was going to say, you've
whatever.
got to run to the airport.
Yeah. No airport in this. That's too big budget. And then I basically improvised as I went along, and that changed quite a few times. Like one of my major beats, I wrote it, and then I was like, nah, that's not particularly good. Deleted it, wrote it another one that sort of changed how the rest of it sort of stacked. So I had to go back. But weirdly, I would often plan, once I started writing a chapter, I would often plan out the comedic beats in the chapter. I was almost a little bit more concerned about jokes landing than like the narrative making sense, which was a big issue by the time I got to the copy editor, who just kept saying things like, Patrick, do you understand what time is? When is this set? You can't just keep saying a week later.
It's a spine. It's not a timeline.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I don't care. It's set in 2015. They're like, why? All your references need to change. I'm like, fine, it's not set in 2015. I don't care.
There are no clocks in my book, okay? All right, does anybody else have a question out there? Oh, one in the front. Over here, sorry. It's very dark.
Hi. You mentioned the idea of a jester before, and do you feel like, especially when you are in single, child-free, renting, millennial, especially like you, Patrick, someone who came out later in life as well, do you feel like there really is that pressure to sort of put on that performative side when you are with your coupled up child friends, because, like, friends with kids, because they're like going, you need to earn your keep with us now, almost. It's like, you need to tell us funny stories, but we're only going to tell you about poo and wee. Because that's what I deal with.
I think I really felt that way, and I think that what happened was that I stopped performing at those brunches because it was kind of their escape, and they'd say, oh, tell us about all the Tinder things and tell us about this and that. And I didn't want to, I now perform for money, and that was for free. And I decided that that's not what I wanted to be doing at Sunday brunches. So I just kind of stopped going to those things. I don't know if that's the correct thing to be doing, but I stopped telling my Tinder stories until I felt like I was in a safe space, and also they would understand where I was coming from and they could match that energy. So if I'm telling you something very personal about my relationship life, I want to know how your sex life is in your marriage, and if we're not trading stories on that. And I feel like it's really unfair when people get married, they kind of all disappear behind closed doors and you don't talk about your personal lives anymore. And I think that's something that I really miss, because so much of your 20s is swapping information and figuring out how we're all doing this together. And then suddenly it's too private. And you're like, but we shared everything. Surely we're sharing this too. So I think for me, it was not so much the jester, it was the disparity of information that we were now sharing that I felt really uncomfortable with and then didn't want to do anymore.
I don't have a lot of straight friends. I was sort of trying to think through it and
Okay, brag.
through choice and also through attrition, and like I moved cities sort of compulsively a couple of times. I keep having breakups and then I'll just like accidentally move cities. Literally once the first time I moved to Melbourne, I did it while I was drunk, and I woke up the next morning and I was like, I signed a lease. What the hell? Okay, I guess I'm going to Melbourne. So I think that like there is just I haven't had a lot of that, because I think as like the paths sort of started to diverge, I don't think I tried to hold on that hard, which is probably not great. I've actually reconnected with a bunch of my old friends from university now, and I think a lot of that is because they had children sort of like directly after uni, and now they're like, they're kind of old enough to not, like not eat bad things or whatever. They're in high school. I don't know what's the problem.
They're
with
not here. They're not at the table with you.
Yeah. Like it's not the back of their skull has formed. So And so now they can actually like, you know, do things that aren't, because like, you know, by necessity, I think a lot of the time it becomes, the ball sort of comes into their court, and like if you want to hang out with them, then you kind of have to meet them where they are, etc., etc. And now they're kind of a bit more free agents, and they're sort of, you know, meeting me in the city
For a cappuccino in a laneway.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, yeah, have you ever had a martini?
I know this question is for the panel and I'm merely the host, but I often, I just find myself year on year finding myself valuing more and holding closer onto the friends who, like me, have decided not to have kids, or who, for whatever reason, are single, and just making sure that I invest just as much, if not more, into those friendships, you know? Okay, we're kind of at time, but I have one last question. Patrick, you mentioned before the kind of era of like the millennial co-worker TV show trope. And I would love to know a little bit about what you see as like the defining works of like our millennial pop culture. You know, I feel like it's so easy to just be like, girls, end of list, you know? But for you, what are those kind of markers of what is now this, it feels like kind of a past generation?
I tend to go earlier. Like, I think Girls was like maybe a defining moment, and it was, you know, it was very much kind of almost like the aspirational sort of thing. Like, we were watching it at that time being like, that's what our lives could be like if we lived in New York.
Yeah.
But really, I tend to go back to like Buffy. That's like, I think millennials were kind of raised on Buffy and shows like Buffy. And to me, that really, like, that's a defining one, because that was about like a very simple premise of like, sometimes life can be hell. And in this particular case, it was high school literally is hell. And then the reason that it sort of sticks with me is that like by season 6, it's all about Buffy trying to have enough money to live, you know? And like, I remember, because I think just roughly around Buffy's age. So I remember like when Buffy was like doing like shitty retail jobs and trying to save the world, I was doing shitty retail jobs and not trying to save the world, you know, so I felt sort of bad. You know, I was like, I'm struggling just like her, but I'm not even.
I can't imagine how hard she's got it.
I'm not even killing vampires. I'm just day drinking. So I think definitely that, but I think and then it's the workplace comedies kind of like got that next stage. I think I also think Broad City is like, for me, that was like the defining like millennial comedy show.
Yeah. Sashi, what about you?
My cultural markers are horrific. I've never been cool. I'm not a culture writer. I was away for so long. And also, when I was a teenager, my parents didn't let me watch anything. So I wasn't allowed to watch Buffy. I wasn't allowed to watch Dawson's Creek. There was too much kissing. I know.
I mean, it was pretty racy, to be fair to your parents.
When I say I missed everything, like I missed everything. So I feel like I caught up in my 20s and only through like workplace comedies very much. So The Office, Parks and Rec, that was such a time in comedy, just in improv comedy even, right?
Yeah.
Like, because they just had so much going on. New Girl, I still watch that repeatedly.
Yeah,
it
same.
just makes me laugh all the time, even though those girls are just so attractive. It's unfair. They just made bangs and ballet flats just look so easy, and it's not easy, and that's what I learned. It's not fair.
It's really not.
Yeah, so for me, those are when I first arrived in Melbourne, everyone would talk about how cool Seinfeld was, and I missed the whole Seinfeld thing. So I was like, I'm sorry, I can talk about Friends, and they'd be like, Friends is cancelled. And I'm like, oh no, that's all I can talk about.
Their apartment's too big. We hate them. Yeah.
Do you think Friends is Gen X, or do you think we own it?
Oh, good question.
Yeah.
I feel like it's ours, don't it? Or is it on the border?
Because it's definitely started in Gen X.
They
but
can't have it.
Well, it was the late 90s.
Yeah.
Or mid 90s, right?
Mid, yeah.
Yeah, it ended in the late 90s. Yeah, I think, well, it's pretty squarely their Gen X. It's a Gen X experience. They are of Gen X experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so hard because like something like Friends and even maybe Seinfeld to a lesser extent it's so pervasive that that it really isn't generational. But I do feel like Friends did give us a bit of a brain disease around the concept of friends forever.
Yes,
you know,
they ruined it.
Yeah.
Or staying friends with your exes. Like, you don't have to. It's
No.
kind of insane.
Just
that
don't
you
do
did.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Move out.
Yeah. Go to Paris, right? It's the whole thing. I just can't. Yeah.
But again, the apartments, they're so big.
Yeah.
Okay, on that note, we're out of time. Thank you all for coming. Please join me in thanking Patrick and Sashi.
Thank you.